I'm confident that the other distinguished lecturers in this series will expand and deepen the concepts that I'm going to present in the coming weeks and months. I also want to offer my own deep thanks to the staff of the Preparatory Office for the International Center for the Interpretation and Presentation of World Heritage Sites for organizing these lectures about best practices and emerging trends in the public communication of heritage knowledge and significance. So I suppose the obvious place to begin is with a definition of what the compound term World Heritage Interpretation and Presentation means. World Heritage is, of course, the global project of the 1972 UNESCO Convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage, the foundational document of the UNESCO World Heritage Program, the UNESCO World Heritage Center, and the basis for the World Heritage List. Together with the Convention's operational guidelines, namely the detailed rules for the nomination, inscription, management, and monitoring of the now 1,121 World Heritage Sites in 167 countries, these two basic texts set out the process of World Heritage nomination, inscription, and management. But they offer only a very general indication of what interpretation and presentation mean. Article 4 of the World Heritage Convention, for example, declares that each state party, that is, nation that has signed and ratified the convention, recognizes the duty of ensuring the identification, protection, conservation, presentation, and transmission to future generations of the world's cultural and natural heritage. But nowhere else in the convention text is the term presentation further defined. The operational guidelines use the terms interpretation and presentation more or less interchangeably, generally equating them with the public explanation of World Heritage Sites. So what exactly is the differentiation between the two terms? ICOMOS, the International Council for Monuments and Sites, is one of the recognized professional advisory bodies to the World Heritage Committee, and ICOMOS's 2008 Charter for the Interpretation and Presentation of Cultural Heritage Sites offers a somewhat clearer distinction. In the Charter's definitions, the term presentation denotes the carefully planned public communication of heritage information through the arrangement of physical access, visitor pathways, guided tours, and infrastructure such as informational panels, multimedia kiosks, and sometimes even elaborate visitor centers. As such, presentation is a largely one-way mode of communication in which visitors are offered authoritative information presented by experts. Now, as I mentioned, the term interpretation is often used as a synonym for presentation, but the ICOMOS Charter makes an important distinction. In contrast to its definition of expert-designed presentation, it characterizes interpretation as the full range of potential activities intended to heighten public awareness and enhance understanding of cultural heritage sites, including community activities, participation in discovery, special events and celebration, and evaluation of the interpretation process itself by everyone involved, visitors and experts alike. What distinguishes the two is the role of the visitors in the process. In presentation, they are, for the most part, passive consumers of information. In interpretation, they are interpreters themselves. They are active participants in the formulation of a site's significance. Why would this distinction be made? In fact, in the world today, there are clearly two quite different approaches to the public communication and involvement of the general public at cultural heritage sites. Now, to return to the issue of presentation, the classic exposition of expert-driven heritage communication was written by a United States Park Service official, Freeman Tilden, in 1957. Tilden himself used the term interpretation, but at the heart of his theoretical vision were 6 guiding principles, each of which stressed the central role of the heritage guide. These principles included a creative communication style, the ability to spark the visitor's imagination about the significance of the site, and awareness of the cultural or educational level of any group of visitors, and the appropriate tone with which they should be addressed. Later followers of Tilden expanded the number of principles to modernize them for 21st century audiences, but the goal of one-way discourse from the guide to his or her listeners remained exactly the same. And it had a very specific purpose. Tilden urged that not only aesthetic and historical information be communicated, but also a conservation ethic as well. Through interpretation, he wrote, understanding. Through understanding, appreciation. Through appreciation, protection. This was Tilden's much quoted dictum, which has served as a guiding motto of heritage interpretation and presentation, and the global profession that it has spawned. This traditional top-down approach to heritage communication has definite educational value, but it also has several drawbacks for the multicultural era in which we now live. It unquestioningly assumes that the guides or the site's audience believes that the elements of the formal presentation possess unique authority about the significance of the site, and that significance has direct relevance to them. The audience is assumed to be distinct only as individuals whose, quote, personality and experience, rather than pre-existing knowledge, beliefs, or socio-cultural orientation, are, according to Tilden, the targets of interpretation's direct relational appeal. Its content, its view of historical truth, is seen as relatively unproblematic, derived from the factual perspectives of historians, architects, and archaeologists. It is seen as an action designed to promote public appreciation for the importance of heritage, its physical vulnerability, and the necessity for its conservation as carried out by the official stewards of the locality or the state by the methods and conservation principles that the state or the local authority approves. But increasingly, in our time, if not already in Tilden's, heritage is not seen by everyone as a universally recognized and shared resource, nor are its official stewards always regarded as impartial guardians. As we see in so many places today, irreconcilable conflicts over what heritage exactly is, how and to whom it is significant, and which nations or ethnic groups own it are, as we all know, matters that are sometimes of bitter dispute, most often between custodians of heritage properties and local or associated communities. Tilden's 6 principles of interpretation fail to address adequately the legitimacy, reality, and inevitability of conflicting perspectives. Among the many examples that could be cited are the contested history of Jerusalem, political controversies over the Kasubi tombs in Uganda, the destruction of the Buddhas of Bamiyan, or the conflict between Hindus and Muslims over the religious primacy at Ayodhya in India. And that is even before we start to speak about the fundamentalist destruction of the unique Sufi tombs and libraries in Timbuktu in Mali, and the extensive devastation by ISIS of World Heritage Sites in Syria and Iraq. But we need not dwell only on these cases of violent heritage conflict to grasp the full extent of this problem. For in our era of identity politics, indigenous rights campaigns, and increasing regional autonomy, the control of heritage sites and objects and their interpretation has become a bone of contention between regions, localities, communities, ethnic groups, and nation states all over the world. And in addition, the phenomenon of the gentrification of historic districts, over-tourism, demographic dispossession, and unanswered claims to the repatriation of plundered or looted relics, and even more sensitively, the control of human remains found at archaeological sites, all pose complex challenges to the possibility of a single universal method of interpretation that will unfailingly mobilize unanimous community support. At the same time, the technological trends that led to the formulation and eventual ratification of the ICOMOS Charter on the Interpretation and Presentation of Cultural Heritage Sites prominently included digital technologies, particularly visualization, interactive websites, crowdsourcing, and immersive virtual environments, which were becoming recognized as the cutting edge in public outreach. It was also a time when policy initiatives, such as the Bura Charter of ICOMOS Australia, UNESCO's recommendation on historic urban landscapes, the Council of Europe's Faro Framework Convention, all were establishing the principles of public rights and responsibilities in the conservation and interpretation of heritage sites. These two elements, the increased online dissemination and technology of heritage information, and the enhanced role of all stakeholders in creating heritage content as well as consuming it, created the conditions for a new approach to interpretation within wide sectors of the international heritage community. The aim was to supplement the exclusive authority of the professional guide or interpreter with a collaboration with stakeholders, adding new people, new voices, and new themes into interpretive discourse. Professional interpreters and educators will not, of course, ever disappear from the heritage landscape, but their expertise will, I suspect, be primarily on the transfer of empirical and technical information. The ICOMOS Charter expressed the hope that the engagement of local and associated communities in interpretation would empower them to express aspects of local and regional identity and understanding, even family memories and associations that are not included or even regularly considered in the statements of outstanding universal value of every World Heritage Site. As we all know, especially in the case of World Heritage Sites, there is much more at stake in effective presentation and interpretation than public education, support for continuing conservation initiatives, or even community empowerment. Even now, in this time of COVID, international development agencies continue to encourage hard-pressed regions to take advantage of their heritage resources as engines of economic development whenever public health considerations will allow tourism to resume. All too often, however, and this is an important point to keep in mind, increasing tourist numbers and the desperate quest for economic benefit can turn a heritage site or historic district into a local industry in which the message conveyed to arriving visitors may sometimes just reflect what the community and site managers hope that the visitors will like. It may be useful to examine more deeply the processes of community participation in heritage interpretation. Yes, we now understand that visitors to a World Heritage Site are not simply passive receptors of expert perspectives. We also understand that local communities are not just faithful bearers of tradition. In places and times of uneasy multicultural coexistence, no interpretive presentation can ever be sure that the audience has correctly understood or even remember all the dates and names that the interpreter mentioned. What I'm suggesting is a far more important role for the members of the local community at World Heritage Sites, and indeed at all heritage sites everywhere. As an ongoing process, every party to this interaction will try to respond or fill in the gaps and unspoken assumptions of the others, to call to mind issues of significance that others have ignored or omitted. Expert analysis could combine in creative ways with local lore, artistic creativity, children's drawings, and neighborhood photos and smartphone videos to express an ever-deepening representation of the site's significance. For without the essential involvement of the community, enriching the interpretation of a World Heritage Site, even its most slickly designed visitor centers and multimedia applications will lack roots among the local population, which is, of course, the only group that can ensure the site's long-term sustainability as a place of significance. As noted in UNESCO's 2013 Hangzhou Declaration, culture must be placed at the center of all plans for sustainable development. Culture and cultural heritage in this perspective is a way of seeing, a way of perceiving values and ethics, not merely a collection of venerated buildings, landscapes, and things. In this regard, we must look beyond traditional methods of communicating heritage significance to consider community involvement in heritage interpretation to be a profoundly important public activity. Its place in public discourse, conversation, debate, and discussion are no less important than other debates about social policy, development issues, or immigration restrictions, all of them based on an evolving consensus of past, present, or future local and national identity. Innovative programs framing heritage as a platform for contemporary debate and discussion have proved successful at contested sites and sites of conscience. But in all heritage sites, the widening and deepening of heritage interpretation from a transmission of specialized knowledge to the revitalization of collective memory and collective cultural creativity can have tangible benefits for everyone who manages, visits, or even lives in the vicinity of a World Heritage Site. I would be remiss if I didn't mention another kind of community engagement. For a community that has been systematically excluded from full participation in the overwhelming majority of the 1,121 current World Heritage Sites. This community is not restricted to a certain location, and its cultural traditions are as varied as the cultural diversity of the world. I'm speaking of the people who were once branded as disabled, but are now seen as fully human and entitled to the same rights of those with mobility, vision, hearing, and other cognitive abilities shared by the majority. All too often, when interpretation is offered to the community, it is seen as a distinctly secondary service to give those people with disabilities at least something to remember, be it braille strips on interpretive panels or the use of elevators, handrails, and ramps. As UNESCO itself has acknowledged, this community is growing rapidly as the people of my generation, the great baby boom demographic bubble, reaches the age where, frankly speaking, mobility, sight, hearing, and other senses just aren't what they used to be. Certainly, there is some limit to the physical infrastructure for people with mobility impairments that can be installed in a World Heritage Site where the integrity and authenticity of architectural fabric and surrounding landscapes is a sine qua non. But here too, I think, a new paradigm of heritage interpretation can help serve the community and enhance the heritage experience for everyone. At present, site interpretation is overwhelmingly visual, but other senses are also involved. In fact, most of us have gotten used to overworking our visual sense so that it might be surprisingly enlightening to experience heritage sites through a variety of sensory impressions without the idea that listening, touching, tasting, and hearing soundscapes are merely for persons with handicaps or for kids. I am by no means suggesting that heritage interpretation become nothing more than wild free association by every group, faction, or community. But together with the scholarly factual information that heritage professionals can provide, new approaches to ever more inclusive interpretation may help us all to benefit from a more holistic understanding of what world heritage, all heritage, can mean. In our age of mass movements, social upheavals, demographic, economic, and technological changes, Freeman Tilden's motto should be replaced by a new one that reflects the ongoing paradigm shifts. Process, not product. Collaboration, not passive instruction. Memory community, not heritage tourism audience. And the relationship between communities and World Heritage sites could, and maybe even should, benefit more widely from the tools of engagement, inclusiveness, and empathy. Thank you very much.